Welcome back to another episode of the Heatio Home Energy Show. And today we are joined by Emma Fletcher, the Low Carbon Homes Director for Octopus Energy. Welcome to the show, Emma.
Thanks for having me, Simon.
No, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. And I know we spoke a few weeks back and we had a really interesting chat. So I was really keen to get you on the show and talk about all the great work that you're doing, both at Octopus and in the Swatham Heat Networks project as well. But before we get into some of that stuff, would you mind just giving a little bit of background to yourself and how you made it into the industry?
Yes, certainly. So by way of background, I'm actually a rural surveyor. So I did 2 years and became qualified as an RICS surveyor. And then I've worked in various roles within the construction and property industry, about 25 years of experience. But not the day job. I decided to set up a community land trust, built some homes for the village. And then on the back of that, I decided to take the village off oil with the heating project. And it was that project that caught the attention of Greg Jackson at Octopus, who invited me in to come and talk about the project. And we got chatting and he offered me a job. So that's how I'm at Octopus.
Oh, so you know Greg himself then?
I don't say I know him, but I had a very nice conversation with him. He's a fairly inspiring character. And,
absolutely.
He wants to know about my project and, they're doing some amazing stuff at Octopus and it seemed like a natural move.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, he's definitely he's my aspiration. He's when I think of what we want to try and create at Heatio, I look at what Greg and the wider team there have done at Octopus, and it's definitely inspiring from our perspective, without a doubt. And so in that role as an assessor, obviously, I'm assuming you've picked up a really, really good understanding of all the requirements of taking our aging housing stock through that transition towards net zero. One of the questions I wanted to ask you, what do you think is one of the biggest challenges that we face in taking our existing housing stock on that journey?
I think probably the biggest challenge is the people who live inside them, because it's a fairly daunting prospect having to sort out your home. So, we work alongside a lot of housing associations and local authorities, and they have to encourage their tenants, the occupiers, to actually allow them in to do the work in their homes. So that's a big conversation. And then for those people who actually do own their homes or have a mortgage on them, it's a big step forward. Where do you start? And that's a really big issue for people because it can be so overwhelming. There's lots of talk of internal wall installation, external wall installation. Do some insulation in your loft. How about your windows, your doors, your heat pump, the solar? There's just so much information out there that the biggest challenge is actually trying to break this down into really simple understanding and language for people who live in those homes, to make sure that they understand what they're doing to their home and actually how it will benefit them as well, in terms of, the aim of the game has to be lower heating bills and making your home much more comfortable to actually live in moving forwards. Yeah,
it's such a big challenge. And as you say, the investment side, to have all that done, both from a time and financial, they've got to see the rewards at the end of that. But as you say, that roadmap of improvements that somebody can make in the home, I suppose it sometimes depends who you speak to and what their drivers are. It might depend on which technology you ultimately get promoted to. I'm sure if you speak to a solar salesperson or a solar installer, they're going to promote solar over the other technologies, whereas maybe a heat pump would do the same. But I suppose that's one of the benefits of this kind of retrofit assessor type approach. I guess they'll look at the property and take a holistic view of all the changes that need to be made and what is the roadmap that best suits that home.
Yeah, I mean, certainly with my RICS hat on, I'm now the chair of the residential professional group panel. And that's something very much the RICS and the surveying world takes very seriously. Where are you going to go to get really good independent advice to make sure that, it's actually the right technology for your home? Lots of people remember spray foam being the new thing, and then obviously it's not the new thing, and things like concrete render on old homes not being suitable. So actually going and finding decent retrofit assessors who are qualified and can take time to look at your property and understand what your property needs, I think, is going to be really important moving forward, because who do people trust? And then who can you get to come and do the work, who you trust doing the work on your home? There's a huge industry that's evolving out there and is actually quite exciting for people who want to actually start sort of doing stuff. So stop talking and start doing, and helping the country actually decarbonise the existing housing stock. Because I think we really need to be clear about, every home has to do something in order to get to, the targets of 2050. And it's making sure that that's done in a fair, equitable and dare I say it, cost-effective way, because, it's going to be expensive and grants keep changing, and that's all equally confusing. And it's the ability to do the right thing at the right time when money, time and ability allows.
Yeah, absolutely. And it feels like we have this, we talk about this kind of skills gap in the engineering side, where we're looking at the trades people to come through and be able to service the needs of these customers. But I think it feels like that skills gap in the retrofit assessor as well. I was having a look at the numbers of registered retrofit assessors, and they're still relatively small. Do you see that being a natural progression from, say, being a domestic energy assessor to becoming a retrofit assessor? Is that the standard route that we go through, and we call on more of those DEAs to make that transition? Or do you think it's something that we need to kind of go back to basics and look at the people coming through college to train them on this whole house retrofit approach and bring them into the industry?
So I see it as probably three speeds. Those who can fast transition into this, so your existing surveyors that can go out and do that work, who understand buildings, so that's fast. Get those people quickly trained up if they need any more additional skills, but get them out there doing the job. The medium is taking people who maybe, are sort of in the industry but not fully up to speed, and getting them qualified. That will take a little bit longer. And then you've got the people who are in school now who are thinking, well, what am I going to do? What can I do as a career? And that's that more apprentice route coming through, because we're going to need those three speeds. Because if we take the people that we can move into the industry quickly now, they are few and far between. Everybody is chasing those people as well to come and work for them. So, they're a limited supply of people that are already fairly up to speed. The medium section is a wider group of people that could be trained up, but you're still looking at potentially, a good amount of six months to a year to get those people up to where they should be in terms of qualifications, understanding of buildings. And then you've got the apprentice route that probably could be 2 or 3 years. So, we've got to get all of these people moving along through the training programs that are already out there in order to actually get them out and trusted in the community with people doing the work. So I don't think there's one easy win. I think we have to really work very hard for everybody to bring them through, because the government is heavily invested in the retrofit assessor coordinator roles, and we've got universities looking at doing the apprenticeship roles, and colleges too. And I think all levels have to be supported, because we need to make sure we're bringing people into the industry. As post-COVID, we lost an awful lot of people out of the industry, in the construction industry, in particular those over 55 who decided to retire. So we had a huge loss of qualified people, and we've gone backwards, if anything, in terms of people that we can call upon.
And it's that experience that was lost as well. That's, I think, one of the bits that we've certainly seen in the renewable heat world. We've actually seen, they say, engineers that were maybe starting to work towards retirement, or certainly not necessarily wanting to spend as much time on the tools, but the experience that they've gained during their time on the tools and fitting these installations, and the learning that's gone on, for that not to be passed on to the next generation. It's such a big loss. And we are starting to see a few of them coming back in now and taking on more kind of mentoring style roles, and maybe getting into some of the training facilities. But it's a huge loss for the industry. But do you see, within, obviously Octopus are a hugely tech-driven business as well. Do you see tech playing a part in this ability to assess an existing home and start to make those recommendations alongside qualified surveyors? Or do you think it really does require that in-home visit and somebody to sit there and look around the property and discuss those needs with the customer?
So I think the world is changing very fast. I think for valuation surveyors, for example, you've got automated valuations that the banks are using more and more, and that's where the computers have come in and taken jobs away, if that makes sense, from the traditional surveying world. I now think that with technology moving as it is, it needs to be alongside everything else. My own personal view is that, every single home in the UK is different from a retrofit angle because people live in them differently. They run their homes differently. They've done different refurbishments to their job. You take a standard street of, say, terrace houses, they all look maybe fairly similar for the front, but some will have had double glazing, some won't. Some will have changed, put some cladding on. It's a really difficult skill for a computer to go and pick up.
Absolutely.
But they are getting better. And we certainly, from an Octopus point of view, are very much behind the data-driven green transition. So the ability to do more things up front, certainly with data like EPC data, LiDAR data, energy bill data, you can actually make a fairly good assessment of what that house is likely to be. But only when you get actually into that home can you see where the wiring goes, where the plumbing is, where the cat flap is. All these things that impact how many Christmas decorations they've got in the loft, and you can't get up there to do it properly. It's the living in the home that really does change. And even just street view. Not every year the street view car goes up and down. So things may have changed on the house that you wouldn't know by relying on that data. So for me personally, I think there is always a role for data, but then at the same point, definitely the human being gets involved and needs to go out on site and see what is actually on the ground.
Yeah, I think that's it. There's very little replacement for that experience coming into the home and actually seeing it firsthand. And we've been working on a project where we're building a housing data set. I think we're close now to about 1.5 million different house types in this model. And the aim is that by receiving the smart meter data from a customer's home and overlaying some questions around how they use that property, we try and identify a house type within that model to start gaining an understanding of how the energy usage breaks down. So that will be things like how much is used for space heating, how much is used for water heating, lighting, appliances, etc. And probably naively, we started with around 15,000 homes in that data set, and it quickly became apparent we had a focus group of about 200 homes that came in, and the differences in how people and the occupants in those homes use them meant that you could have, as you say, a terraced house that was from the front end looks exactly the same, but actually the people living in the home and how they use that home had a huge impact in how energy was being used. And there was one particular standout property and customer to me where everything they provided in terms of the information around their home suggested that it should be this particular house type, and we couldn't get the energy usage to match at all. We couldn't get it even close. And it was only then when I actually personally engaged with the customer and was saying, this is an outlier here. We can't get this to match at all. And the customer opened up to me and told me that actually they couldn't afford to have their heating on. So during the winter months, there was no space heating load whatsoever. And no amount of data necessarily is going to give you that engagement with the customer where they actually are open and honest with you about maybe their current position and their affordability, and the fact that they sit there with blankets in the winter months just to get them through. And so I think that combined approach is going to be needed to get us to where we can really start to understand what's going on in the home, and then subsequently what is the right solution for that customer, rather than maybe looking at it holistically and simply saying, these types of homes should have these impacts and these improvements made to them. But it's a big challenge. It's a big challenge that I'm sure with the work that Octopus are doing, especially across heat pump installations, that ability to be able to look at a home, understand what improvements are needed, and how they can take that customer on the journey. It's going to be, I'm sure, a long journey, but a really beneficial one if we can get people on that on the road to those improvements.
And I think you're right. I think it is a journey. And what the heat pump can do is weirdly help people overcome that big hump of what do I do first. It really, once your heating and your hot water still work, when this new technology's been, brought in, your levels of anxiety go down, right? Because guess what? You've still got hot water and you've still got heating. And so you're thinking, right, I've transitioned away probably from my gas-fired boiler, and guess what? This thing on the outside of the house that looks a bit strange, looks a bit different to what I'm used to, it works. And I think when people realise it works, they then think, oh, okay, that's fine. I've done that bit. Now maybe I should consider, when I have the time, the inclination, the money, the grants, maybe I'll look at my loft insulation. Then I can start doing maybe windows on a room by room basis, or in 3 or 4 years' time, I might change my kitchen. So then that's the time to put internal wall insulation in. It sort of helps when you've just sorted the heating and the hot water. You can psychologically then start breaking it down into smaller chunks. And that's exactly what we've seen with the heating scheme in the village. People were very against it because it was quite fearful, new technology maybe, just higher levels of anxiety. But then once you turn on the tap and the hot water's still flowing and the heating can still work, whether you choose to have it on or not from an economic put, parking that to one side, but it still works, that massive barrier in your head dissipates. And we see it a lot with electric vehicles. So, we do a lot with electric vehicles and salary sacrifice schemes. And for a lot of people, taking up an electric vehicle through their job, it then means they've got a car, probably a diesel or a petrol car, that they then don't need anymore. And so what we're seeing is people are taking on an electric vehicle, understanding the flexible tariffs and how you charge your car at the cheapest rates when the grid is negative or very cheap, and that flexing of when you use power, and then thinking, well, actually, maybe I'll start to look at solar and battery, because actually that's kind of what I'm doing for my car. And so it's like that first step into actually understanding that I can change my habits. It's financially better off for me. It's better for the planet. And I can do this. It breaks it down into really nice little chunks about how you can take your own personal journey forward.
Yeah, I think Mick Wall, who was on the show from Energy Stats UK, is obviously a big fan of Octopus and the agile energy tariffs. And I think he referred to it as the kind of gateway drug. And I think that was really, really relevant when you actually, probably for the vast majority of people in the UK, visibility of their energy usage and understanding of how that energy usage breaks down. In terms of priority, it probably sits quite high. It's in terms of, especially in more recent times with the energy crisis, that spend is a big chunk of their outgoings. But actually knowing what they can do next and what they can do about it is probably one of the more difficult parts. Whereas the minute you engage in this process, and be that doing something as simple as downloading an app that starts to show you your half-hourly smart meter data, or making one of those big decisions. So for instance, if your boiler breaks and you're in that position where you're in a distress purchase and you make the decision to consciously or otherwise go for a heat pump, then you do start to engage in that process. You do start to see the transition in your energy usage. And as you say, maybe it sparks the next point on the journey, whether that's having solar added to your home, or increasing your loft insulation, because you can genuinely see the impact. So I think some of these technology points will be triggers for people to move down the line. It's just, certainly with heat pumps at the moment, it feels like it's such a big infrastructure project in somebody's home, especially when you consider the level of upgrades that typically get recommended, that if there's more we can do to maybe simplify that process and engage with the customer on let's get the heat pump in, and then maybe let's start making some of those incremental upgrades, maybe we do take more homeowners on that journey, and it's not such a huge infrastructure project in one hit.
But I mean, there's stats around 80% of gas-fired homes are combi boiler systems. So it's not just putting an air source heat pump on the outside. We also need to think about where the tank needs to go as well. And a lot of modern homes have been designed very efficiently, and therefore finding the space to put this when, you've already allocated space to, I don't know, the ironing board and the hoover and things like that. It's actually, where do you find the space to put the kit? And again, that has high levels of anxiety for people, but it can be overcome. And I think that's really where a good retrofit assessor or a surveyor going out and explaining to people what it will look like, how much space it will take up. And technologies are moving on all the time. You can get squatter tanks, you know what I mean, that fit in tighter spaces. I think these things will evolve, and the more people that have them installed, people like to go over and see it and touch it and look at a battery, look at an inverter. And also there's dispelling the myths. I mean, even with friends who've got electric vehicles, they hadn't appreciated you could just have a battery. You don't even need to have solar on the roof. The battery can also, in your home, can act like your car battery. There's always this association that battery should be with solar, but actually you can split these technologies up. And that's kind of the joy, is that, you need to look at your home, look at what the assets are of the home, be it the roof or the space, be it the garden or the land around. And then you need to look at what technologies are out there, and sort of, it's a bit of a jigsaw as to what might work for your home and how you bring them together. And then it's a matter of what time you bring them in, what can you afford, what grants are available, as to when you actually put them in which sort of order. But it's scary for a lot of people.
Yeah, it can be a huge project. And do you mind me asking, on the Swatham project with the heat networks, that must to take a whole community to essentially away from, was it oil they were on in the village, or?
Yeah, predominantly oil. We've got no mains gas. So there are a number of homes that are on LPG gas or on electric, but predominantly it was an on-oil community.
And did you have to, was there a percentage of the community that had to sign up to this, or did you need 100% of the community to make that transition?
So, I mean, it's evolved over time. It started off with a survey of the village, and of the village responses back, 160 households came back saying that they were interested in the project. So that was the very start. And with all things with numbers, these numbers tend to get remembered. So 160 sort of became the golden number that we've always been targeting to hit. As it happens, the village has about 200 homes in the core. And whilst we've got 64 homes are now on the scheme, we hope to get similar attached this year, and it will be keeping going. So we have a 5-year plan of attaching homes to the district heat network, but it is sized for up to 300 homes.
Wow.
Because obviously the energy centre could last for 60, 70 years. The pipe network certainly does. So you have to just make sure that it is future-proof for further growth. But there have been some interesting developments, and a nearby village has asked whether they could join. So it's quite possible that might be something that we explore further as well.
Fantastic.
So, we've got a 7.5 kilometre pipe network running through the village, and actually we could see a direct link to the nearby village and maybe a top-up energy centre in their village to take the temperature up. So, it's triggered a lot more thinking around this, that it's achievable, but what it's shown is that people really are quite nervous. But once they see it working and they can see it and come and kick the tyres, so to speak, actually it dispels a lot of the myths that are out there.
That's incredible, though, because you can imagine in a village of 200 people, you probably have a fairly wide split from your kind of early adopters to your laggards, and to engage with a significant proportion enough to start that project. And I think that you mentioned there was 60 that went on to the network. Was that when it was first put in, or was there a lower number that
so
you needed
64, to? Yeah, there's 64 currently on the system, but the 160 is really kind of our psychological target, because that's how many people said they were interested at the start. But we think we should have another 60 or so on this year, and then, as I say, we've set ourselves 5 years to get everybody that wants to be connected.
That's incredible. I mean, we're working on a project at the moment under the Green Homes Finance Accelerator, which is a project funded under the Net Zero Innovation Portfolio. And a big part of that project is trying to bring lenders into the market to deliver an energy as a service proposition into domestic homes. And part of the challenge that we've seen there is ultimately bringing the lenders in to build confidence that they will ultimately see returns on their investment for funding these kind of infrastructure projects. And admittedly, in the projects that we're looking at, it's very much a single domestic dwelling. So we would We would turn up at the property. We would design, install a heat pump, solar, and battery, and thermal storage for the hot water. And essentially, that's a funded project. It goes into the home, and then they enter into a kind of long-term service agreement where they pay a fixed monthly fee. And the idea being that should equate to around 75% of their energy needs coming via the energy as a service package, with a top up from a retail energy supplier. But to get the lenders comfortable with this and to take them through that journey it's been a huge journey for us. I mean, we started on this in around 2018, and we're just now getting to the point where we'll actually start to see some of these funds getting deployed. But that must have been a challenge for this project, I assume, to get a lender or maybe the wider question is, how did you go about getting the funding together to fund that energy centre to service those homes?
I mean, similar as you said about this project, we did have significant grant funding from government to help the project along. And it's because of that we spend a lot of time now talking to a lot more other villages, towns, community groups, because, we appreciate that we're very lucky to have had that funding. But at each stage, initially, when it was just us, the village community, we had 100% grant. We had £20,000, and that helped kickstart the project. And then we built on that, and we worked alongside the county council. So from pretty much the second stage of grant funding, we've been working alongside the county council, who own the land where the energy centre sits on, who own the energy centre, and they are actually our provider of heat. So the county council owns the energy centre, they own the pipe network, and they're the ones that bill us and run it.
Wow.
Admittedly, yes, commercially, but on a low level commercial versus other people, because they are so keen to be seen to be trialling and running projects like this, because, as a county, there's 25,000 other homes that are also on oil. So, we need to come up with these community scale solutions. Also, it's a bit like flat screen televisions, right? Footballers could only afford them 10 years ago, but if you go into a shop now to buy a television, they're all flat screen. So the theory being that we already know that there'll be significant savings for the next projects coming forward. Our borehole people they spent a week to put the first borehole in, but by the end of the project, they did all of the borehole and the pipe network into that borehole in a day.
Wow.
So, learning and speed is equally valuable as some of the other costs, and getting it done quicker. And just things like writing the heat supply agreement, we had to get lawyers to do that. So the next projects that come forward really will be able to be much more agile, faster, quicker at delivery, and that will save money as well.
Yeah, it's incredible. It takes these pioneering projects to, as you say, to have the bravery to go and take something like this on. I mean, it's a credit to the local authority as well, and the council that's supported this, because that's that's a very long-term commitment, isn't it? When you do something like this, you're essentially becoming the primary energy supplier for. Is it just heat and hot water on these ones? I think you mentioned, but you're becoming the primary heat and hot water supplier for those properties for forever, I assume. There's no plan to decommission this after 20 years. So I guess this means that those homes for the rest of the time when they're on this planet will be getting fed from the heat center or similar energy centers of maybe it grows over time, but that's a huge commitment.
It is a huge commitment, but unlike a lot of other local authorities, Cambridge County Council have a specific team set up to generate energy projects from land that they own.
Wow.
Or buildings that they own. So they have solar farms that they own on county farmland. They have projects with schools with solar on the roofs, with air source heat pumps. So they've got park and ride sites that are generating solar. So they were fairly forward thinking. I mean, this was maybe 7 years ago they set this unit up. So they're using these energy projects to give money back into the core services from the council, like adult social care, etc. So, all credit to the county council for sure, that they could see how they could be using things that they own in order to generate localised power or heat, in our case, in order that any income can then be put back into doing what, they have to deliver in terms of the general public. So, interesting model. I'm not sure I have seen many other councils replicate it, but it seems to be doing well in Cambridgeshire.
It's incredible. No, it's really, really impressive. And as you say, it sets a standard for others to follow. And yeah, from the work we've done more recently with some local authorities, I think having somebody like Cambridge who are doing that, because this ultimately feeds into the revenue model for the local authority. I assume this helps the local authority to diversify its income streams and as you say, be able to afford to support some of those day-to-day services, whether it's filling potholes in the road or whatever it might be. If it's able to invest and then see the rewards from these kind of projects, along with, they say, the solar farms, it must help the local authority to be able to stand up on its own 2 feet and be able to support other projects in the region.
So I'm not an expert on their finances, but obviously I'd like to think so, and I think this is very much their aspiration. But also they're a long-term partner, right? Going back to what you were saying about a long-term project, that's the difference. They are a long-term interested party. And I think that's where financing and banking needs to get to too. If you want to be involved and engaged, they are longer-term projects than maybe a quick turn. In terms of, climate change is not easy to tackle. If we're going to tackle it, it has to be long-term projects and they have to be a little bit more patient for returns coming back through.
Absolutely. I think we've definitely felt the pain of that going through the discovery phase of the accelerator program we're on at the moment. As you say, the more kind of traditional 5, 7, maybe even 10-year agreements, they're just not. These need to be seriously long-term commitments, and with that there has to be some kind of predictable and forecastable revenue streams and returns for the funders. But it sounds like an incredible project. How are the people in the village finding it? Have you had any? Is there any negative stories that have come out of it, or any positives alongside it?
So in the run-up, I think you could pretty much say if you search the internet, there's one or two negative stories. We had some fun and games with temporary traffic lights. Our village has a bypass road as well as 3 roads coming into the village and out. And there was one day where somebody ran through the red light on the top road and all the light arms then went to red, and then somebody did that down in the village and everything went to red, and we caused, I think it was probably a 6 or 7 mile tail back through other villages of traffic because all the traffic lights were on red. So that was a pretty bad day for the project. But we overcame that. There's other things people quite rightly worried about, things like footpaths being dug up. We had complaints about wheelie bins being put back on the wrong driveways. I mean, there's different scales of complaint, literally at the homeowner level all the way up. But, we had to be resilient through that. And we've got through the project and we've got through planning and it's been delivered. And now actually we've got 60 plus very happy home occupiers. And that includes a large percentage of affordable homes in our village as well that, have had their homes improved by their housing association. They have, got reliable source of heat. They're not paying for electrified heat, which is very expensive. And, I guess I thought there would be this sort of amazing moment where we'd all celebrate and have this big, wonderful, joyous moment, but it hasn't really come. I mean, you talk to somebody in the pub and they go, well, it kind of works, doesn't it? You know what I mean? Weirdly, it's, I guess, and I haven't been on gas for a long time, but it's a bit like being on gas, right? You don't have to worry about ringing up for your oil tanker to come. You don't have to worry about the oil going down. You don't need to worry about the price of oil. 1 minute being, 22 pence or, over £1 a litre. It takes that away. So maybe it's a bit like childbirth. People have been very quick to forget maybe the negative stuff. But the best thing for me was we had a chap who wrote in the village newsletter and he gave us a lot of grief. But my understanding is he's also now signed up to the project and that has to be a win, right?
Absolutely.
So, I'll take that one as a win. And we've got these other amazing communities that are coming along beside us. One in Suffolk, one over in Oxfordshire, and people want to be doing this for their communities because they see the benefit of everyone changing together. In our village we have people who significantly and dreadfully can't pay. They're in a bad way. They cannot pay. But then we've got other people who probably could pay to do something, but don't have the inclination. And then we've had people who have the ability to pay, who have done something about their homes. But there's a whole spectrum of people out there. But when you do a community scale project, that has no barriers to entry, no upfront costs, working closely with the housing associations, is pretty amazing, really, because it means that everybody can join the project. And that's been something that has been really wonderful to see, that it's a project that benefits everybody. Everybody changes at the same time. And if technology changes in the future, we don't have to go bang through more doors and holes and windows, etc. The pipe network's in. We can do exactly what they've done in Denmark, where they've gone from wood chip back in the 70s and now they're on installing industrial air source. So we've got industrial air source and ground source with a private wire to a solar farm. But if in time technologies change, something wonderful comes forward in 40, 50 years' time, we just have to change the energy centre. We just change the ability to heat the water, but then the rest is all the same. And being able to leapfrog this technology, that's the real benefit of being on a community scale project.
100%. I mean, and even when you make that transition in the future to whatever that new age technology might be, the impact on the homeowners will be minimal. Maybe in terms of, as you say, nobody's having to go into the home, nobody's having to rip anything out. And I think it is challenging because they're the moments that you do want to celebrate, as you say, when you first got this system up and running and connected. And as you say, the hope of having maybe a kind of a street level party with bunting and everything like that. Actually, what you've done and the fact that people have kind of just shrugged and said, yeah, it all works. I think that's the bit that should be, that's the praise, because I think maybe sometimes in this industry, energy is such an important part to us and the journey we go on with, especially with groundbreaking projects like this. But actually for the homeowner, doing something that has such little impact that they just shrug and say, it works, that's incredible, because for most people that make this transition and make this journey, they have to go through so much to get there, and they have to engage so much in the project to get there that actually it probably becomes a barrier. So I think it's fantastic that if you have people that will just turn around and say, yeah, it works, I expected it to work, and their lives just carry on. But behind the scenes, what you've done is actually incredible, that you've managed to, take people off those fossil fuel resources, deliver, let's say, their expectations without having to necessarily take them on a journey of discovery. I think that's actually, that should be really commended. I think that's incredible.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's a bit like IT support, right? You only phone them up when something's gone wrong with your computer. You never ring them up and say, my computer's working brilliantly, thank you so much. So, I think we'd have known about it if it had all gone horribly wrong. That's so to not be hearing anything should be, as you rightly say, celebrated. But, sometimes you can be very swift not to look backwards and realise what you've achieved. You're already thinking the next thing. We've got ideas for doing rewilding projects around the village. Time moves on, right? That project's been achieved. We've got to now just finish rolling it out. But actually, the power of knowing what you can do, you start looking at what else could we be doing. So, there's always some ideas running around in my head as to what could be the next thing. So, it's just making sure that, communities, and particularly rural communities, can still be relevant for people wanting to come and live in them as well. We've got older properties, we've got older population, and they need to be kept safe and warm. And we need new people to decide that they want to come invest in our community to keep the pub open and the school open. Yeah. And, there's a lot to be done, but, I like being part of that. But we see this playing out at work as well, right? People who become our customers at Octopus, they feel that they're part of the sort of Octopus community, Octopus family, and then it's how we can help people, feel like they're being guided in a safe, reliable way as to what to do next, and we take that role pretty seriously.
I think you do an incredible job of it as well. I've been lucky enough to visit 2 of the Octopus offices. I still haven't been to the one in Bristol, which I think you said was, the team there again. It's the energy that's in the Octopus team. But I think one big thing that I've seen from the way Octopus are not only operating themselves but also recruiting is the fact that they're bringing people in that are of a younger generation that are really starting to understand energy. and maybe these people aren't necessarily living in their own homes. Maybe these people aren't paying their own energy bills. Maybe they're living with parents or in student accommodation or whatever it might be. So for the first time, a lot of those employees are starting to engage with energy, and in the future that will embed into them so they can, when they go on and own their own homes. So I think it's an incredible job that Octopus are doing in terms of educating the masses, and I say bringing that Octopus community together. And then those people, no doubt, will have those conversations down the pub and share those ideas and share the projects they're working on. So it's an incredible business, but I think it also has an incredible vision, and certainly spans more than just traditional retail energy supply. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you is the work you've done there on the heat network project. Do you see that coming in to Octopus and utilizing the scale of Octopus to branch that out into other regions?
So one of the big investments that Octopus have made is into Kenza ground source heat pumps, and they also have done similar community scale projects. So whilst we haven't yet done a district heating project with either ourselves or with Kenza, it's definitely something that is on the cards. Certainly we're very excited to be thinking about microgrids from the power, sort of community level power. But if we could combine that with, heating projects as well, that would be pretty amazing. So we're always on the lookout for the project. The answer is we haven't yet, but we do support some amazing community projects. We have a 50-50 tie-up with Unity called Unity Power. It's 50-50 with the co-op. And so we fund that to look at community groups. So whilst we have a specific company looking at community scale, the odd one does come my way, which I get to have a look at as well and help and assist. So who knows, there may be a few more bigger scale projects in the offing.
It must be incredible for yourself as well to be able to have that power of Octopus behind you, to look at these big scale projects and take the learnings from the heat network project at Swatham and bring that into such an organisation where, I say, working with the likes of Kenza, I think in terms of developing heat networks, I think they worked on a project called Heat the Streets under the Heat Pump Ready, and for a company that have been in ground source heat pumps and developing small scale ground source with communal boreholes, to be able to work alongside them with Octopus and all the learnings from Swatham, it must be a really exciting time for you at Octopus.
There could be some very exciting projects coming forward. I think the problem is, where do you focus your attention? And the answer has to be sort of a little bit everywhere. For us, there's been a massive focus on actually removing electricity bills. So with our Zero Bills project, so actually talking with new home providers, housing associations, doing very similar to what you're doing. Putting technology onto new homes, has to be the easy win that we should be definitely pushing and chasing. But it's utilising retrofit opportunities to bring these bigger community scale projects in. In the new build market, still a little bit of scepticism around these sort of communal size schemes. There are some difficulties with putting them into adopted highways as well. So I think give it a couple more years, that actually it will be a lot easier to actually go and implement this sort of scale of project. But for now, a lot of our focus is literally on individual homes and making sure they're the very best they can be in terms of for the occupier moving in. That's definitely a focus for us, and trying to educate the market that actually, solar and batteries, they've come down an awful lot in price over the last year. And air source heat pumps aren't voodoo. They're something that works all over Europe, and they should be installed as standard in brand new homes.
Absolutely, and especially the I actually got to see one of the Octopus heat pumps in the flesh, which was it looks incredible. But I can't wait to see a few more of those going into people's homes.
Yes, certainly. I mean, who wouldn't love a slightly curvy heat pump with an octopus on it? The whole point is to make these much more consumer friendly. It's not a horrible square rectangular box outside. This is something that is giving you heat and hot water. You should love it, and it should look lovable back, right?
So you didn't sign off that design then, no?
I didn't sign off the design, but do I love it?
Yes.
Yeah, of course I love it. The whole point is we're here to disrupt. We can do things differently. It's high temperature. We really want to be moving the industry on, and if it means we have to lead the way doing it, well, that's great. I think the more cozies that are out there, people are going to love them, and the neighbours are going to want one too. It'll become a desirable thing. It will be the heated towel rail of the 80s. Everybody wanted heated towel rails and bidets, didn't they? They'll all want the cosy now.
No, you're doing an absolutely incredible job, and for me, being in renewable heat my whole working life, I think to see an organisation like Octopus coming in and grabbing it in the way they are and driving it forward, it's really exciting. So I'd like to thank you very much for coming on the show today, Emma. It's been great chatting with you, and I think the work you've done, not just in the community scheme but also within Octopus, really excited to see some of that transitioning now into the market and actually seeing that deployed across some homes. So please stay in touch, and hopefully we'll have you on the show again in the future.
Thanks, Simon.
Cheers, Emma. Speak to you again soon.